is focused on the exercises that are at the end of Chapter 1. So the first thing you need to do when you are setting up your homework is we're not going to be using the idle program for testing. We're actually going to be using PyCharm. So open up PyCharm and create a new project, and we're just going to call this Chapter 1. So Chapter 1 is the name of the project, and we can put several files in this chapter. Let's do a new Python file, and we're going to call this exercise 1. All right, so now we have the a file that is created for this particular exercise. And if we look at the homework, what we're being asked to do is to print out a box that looks like the one below. So the task of doing this is quite straightforward. We're going to be printing out a certain number of asterisks, and I'm actually just going to copy that and go back to PyCharm and type in the print command. And the print command automatically comes up with a with a suggestion of what to put inside. We're going to open some parentheses and paste in the number of asterisks that are suggested there. Now there's a total of 4 lines that are needed for this one, so we're actually going to do this 4 times in a row. And so I'm just going to paste this in 4 times, and that'll be the program. And let's go ahead and save this with Command S, and then we can run this. So I'm going to go up to the command and just do a debug, and you'll notice that it then opens up the debugging perspective. And so we see that it ran and it printed out those 4 lines of asterisks. So that is exercise 1. Let's add a new Python file for exercise 2. So this is going to be a separate command, or a separate one. And in this one, we have the same number of asterisks on line 1 and line 4, but on line 2 and 3, we're actually printing out just ones on the end. So I'm going to go back to exercise 1, open that up, and copy this, and paste that into exercise 2. But then what I'm going to do is I'm going to replace this region right here with spaces. And so I'm going to delete all of the asterisks except for the last one. And since I did that, I can copy that and write it over the top of the 3rd line. And this should execute in the same way as the other one, but it should print out a separate command, or a separate pattern, which is shown here. So let's go on to exercise 3. So in exercise 3, they're asking to print a triangle like the one below, and this one just has, this is another very easy program, where basically we have a print command with 1 asterisk for the first line, 2 for the second line, and 3 for the third line, and 4 for the fourth line. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy those print statements in, save that, and if we run this, oops, I ran the wrong one. So that was exercise 2 that was running. Let me just go and select this one. I'm going to execute the debug command up there, and it's going to ask me which one to run. It'll be exercise 3, and you notice that down in the console area, it printed out the correct number of lines. So now number 4 is a little bit different. That one is actually doing a computation of this value right here. So let's open up a new Python file. So a new Python file here. This is going to be exercise 4. Okay, and I'm just going to paste those. I'm going to create a variable called A, which is going to be the result of this multiplication. Now if I type it in, I do have to pay attention to the order of operations. So in the numerator here we have 512 minus 282. So I'm going to type that in, minus 282. And then we're going to be dividing by 47 times 48 plus 5, divided by 47 times 48 plus 5. Now, the way I've typed it in right now, if it follows the order of operations, the first thing that's going to be done is 282 is going to be divided by 47 and then multiplied by 48. And that's clearly not what we want. We want the numerator to be evaluated first. And so we need to actually force that to happen in the code by putting a set of parentheses around that, around the numerator. And in the denominator, we want this addition to be done before this division is done. So we need to also put in a set of parentheses around the denominator to make sure that that's correct. Okay, so this should calculate the right value, and what I need to do is I need to now print that out. And I'm just going to say print A, and that should give me the result that it's looking for, which so I'm going to save that, go up to the menu item, select debug, choose exercise 4, and it gave me the value 0.1017, which is approximately what the book says we should have. Now we're in exercise number 5, we're asking the user to enter a number. We want to enter a number, it's going to enter that, and then it's going to be outputting the square of that number, the number and the square of that number down below. And so for this program, let's go ahead and open up another file. New Python file. This is going to be exercise 5. Okay, so in this command, the first thing we need to do is we do an assignment of some variable. I'm going to call this A, and this is going to be a prompt, so it's going to be using the input command, and inside there we need to put a prompt, and so we're just going to be saying enter a number with the colon afterwards, and now I'm going to put a space in there after that so that it'll write a space in there, so when we type in the number on the screen it'll actually show a space instead of sitting right on top of that colon. The next thing I need to do is I need to calculate the square of that value. So I'm going to call a square. I'm going to create a variable a squared, and that's going to be equal to a times a, so that's one way that I could express that, and that would just be a times a. Or another way I could express that is I could do the double asterisk, and then this gives me the exponentiation instead of just the straight multiplication. Let me go ahead and use the exponential operator there, and now I print the result. So we're going to be using the square of 5 is 25, so I need to output the square of a is a squared and enter those variables in there. So I'm going to use the print command, and in this one the first thing that's going to be output is that string called the square of, and then I'm going to put in comma a, and then the next thing is I need to have the variable is, and then I'm going to type in a squared. Okay, and the last thing I need to output is a period to be able to get the period on the end of this thing. Now this isn't quite correct because it's going to be, I forgot my comma there, that's why it's squawking at me. This thing isn't quite correct because you're going to see that the formatting isn't quite right on this. So let's see what it outputs right now. If I type this, or if I run this, so let me save it, run. I'm going to do a debug, exercise 5, and let's see what happens. Okay, so it's asking me for the number. I'm going to enter 5, and then it goes through and it's actually giving me an error. here. And the reason for this error basically is that let me go back to my code. So the reason for this error, let me look at the console, is that it's doing that power function. Actually, I think I made a mistake here because a squared is unsupported operand type 4. Okay, so what it's telling me is that using this square function right here, it is expecting to have an integer there. Now let me just stop, put a breakpoint on there, and we can actually then let's re-execute the code. So I'm going to press stop to exit that code and press debug again. And now look at what happens here. So I'm going to enter the number 5. Now let's look at A. So A is actually a string. If you highlight over the top of that variable A, the debugger is then telling me that this is a string. It also shows it in here as a string, and we're trying to square a string, which doesn't work. And so one of the things we need to do in this program is we need to cast this number A to be an integer. And so let me stop this code, and I'm just going to do one thing. Instead of taking A as a string, what I'm going to do is I'm going to type the command int, which then forces the A into an integer, and then you can square it. Okay, so let's press debug again and see what happens. Now, when I enter the number 5, it actually goes through and does calculate this correctly without errors. But we still have a little bit of a problem with this period at the end of the sentence. And one of the problems that we have is that, as you reviewed in the chapter, there's a separator that's actually put in between each of the different values that are in this this string that's being sent to the print command, and it's putting a separator that is a space. So after the square of, you see right after the of, it actually puts a space in there before it prints out the value 5 for A. It also puts a space after the value 5 before is, and then it puts a space after is before 25, and it's putting a space after 25 before the period. So the way you get rid of that is by actually forcing the separator to be nothing. So we want to put in that sep command that was shown in the text, and here, instead of having a value for the separator, we're just going to enter an empty space in there. Now we have to actually enter the spaces in manually ourselves. Let's see what this thing does if we use the sep command being equal to just a blank space. Now it actually runs all of these things together. So we have to manually put in spaces. The first place we need one is after the of. The second place we need one is before the is, because we need to separate that 5 and the is. We also need one after the is and before the a squared. And then we can, before the period we don't need one because we want that period to be there. So we've manually entered the spaces. And now if we rerun this program again, now we get the correct formatting of this. I'm going to pause here, and we're going to create a separate video for the next exercises in the chapter.